The first time I argued with Dale, I remember thinking, this guy is impossible. It was a seminar on political philosophy, one of those classes where everyone pretends they've read more than they actually have. The room was small, too warm, and always smelled faintly like old paper and coffee. There were maybe 15 of us, sitting in a circle, which meant there was no hiding if you had something to say. Dale always had something to say. And that's exactly why the argument collapses, he was saying, leaning forward in his chair, voice calm but sharp enough to cut through the room. You can't claim moral responsibility without acknowledging structural limitations. It's inconsistent. I rolled my eyes before I could stop myself. Our professor noticed. Of course he did. Hector, he said, too pleased. You seem to disagree. I straightened in my seat, already feeling that familiar heat in my chest. Yeah, I do. Because what he's saying sounds smart, but it ignores individual agency completely. Dale turned his head toward me slowly, like he'd been waiting for that. I didn't say that, he replied. You implied it. No, he said, more firmly now. I didn't. There was a shift in the room, the kind that happens when people realize something interesting is about to happen. I leaned forward, matching his posture. If you're arguing that systems determine outcomes, then you're downplaying personal responsibility. You can't have both. I'm not downplaying it, he shot back. I'm contextualizing it. That's just a nicer way of saying the same thing. A couple of people laughed under their breath. Our professor didn't intervene. He never did when things got like this. Dale's jaw tightened slightly, not angry focused. You're simplifying it, he said. There's a difference between acknowledging influence and removing responsibility entirely. And you're overcomplicating it, I said. At some point, people still choose. And those choices are shaped by. Everything is shaped by something. I cut in. That doesn't make people less accountable. Silence fell for a second after that. Not awkward. Charged. Dale studied me like I was a problem he hadn't solved yet. I held his gaze, refusing to back down, even though I wasn't entirely sure why I cared so much. Okay, he said finally, slower now. Then answer this. If two people make the same choice under completely different conditions, do you judge them equally? I hesitated. Just for a second. He noticed. That's what I thought, he said, not smug, just certain. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling through my nose. No, but that doesn't mean they're not both responsible. So you agree with me, he said. I laughed sharp. No, I don't. The class erupted into low chatter, people whispering, some smiling like they were watching a match instead of a discussion. Our professor finally stepped in. All right, that's enough for now. Let's move on. But I wasn't done, and neither was Dale. For the rest of the seminar, I could feel this strange awareness of him sitting across from me. Every time he spoke, I listened more closely than I wanted to admit. Not just to argue, but to catch him slipping. He didn't, which was annoying. After class, I packed my bag quickly, ready to leave before anyone could drag me into more debate. I didn't expect to hear his voice behind me. You argue like you're trying to win something. I turned. Dale was standing there, backpack slung over one shoulder, expression unreadable. And you argue like you already think you have, I replied. Something flickered in his eyes' interest. Maybe. That's not true, he said. It kind of is. He adjusted his grip on the strap. You interrupted me 3 times. You were wrong 3 times. That almost made him smile. Almost. You didn't actually answer my question, he said. I did. You avoided it. I reframed it. That's not the same thing. I exhaled, already feeling the argument pulling me back in. Why do you care? He shrugged. Because you're not as inconsistent as you sound. That caught me off guard. What's that supposed to mean? It means, he said, you're arguing against something you partially agree with. I stared at him. That's not. I stopped myself. No, I don't. You hesitated. People hesitate. Not like that. There was something about the way he said it, not accusing, just observant, that made it harder to brush off. I think, he continued, you don't like where the argument leads. I let out a quiet laugh. And you do? No, he said. I just don't pretend it doesn't go there. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The hallway buzzed around us, students passing, voices overlapping, but it felt strangely distant. You're still wrong, I said finally. He nodded, like he expected that. Probably. I frowned. That's it. For now. He turned slightly, like he was about to leave, then paused. Same time next week, he added. I blinked. What? The seminar, he clarified, but there was something else in it. Something lighter. I shook my head, half smiling despite myself. Yeah, obviously. Good, he said. Then he walked away. I stood there for a second longer than I should have, replaying the conversation in my head. He was still wrong. At least, that's what I told myself. But for the first time, I wasn't entirely sure why I wanted him to be. I told myself it was just an argument. Just a class. Just some guy who liked hearing himself talk a little too much. But the next week, I showed up early. Which I never did. I took a seat near the middle this time, pretending it didn't matter where I sat, even though I caught myself glancing at the door every time someone walked in. It was stupid. I knew it was stupid. Then Dale walked in like it was nothing. Same backpack. Same calm expression. Like he hadn't spent the entire last seminar getting under my skin in the most precise way possible. He spotted me immediately. Of course he did. There was no hesitation, just walked over and dropped into the chair across from me. Early, he said. So are you. He nodded once. Fair. That was it. No smirk. No challenge. Just normal. Which somehow made it worse. The seminar started a few minutes later, and I tried to focus. I really did. But every time Dale spoke, I felt that same pull again, like I was being dragged into something whether I wanted it or not. At one point, someone else made a comment that formed, kind of vague, and Dale responded, breaking it down carefully, piece by piece. And I caught it. That thing. The thing I hadn't wanted to admit last time. He wasn't arguing to win. He was arguing to understand. It annoyed me, because it made it harder to dismiss him. Halfway through the seminar, I jumped in again. Okay, but you're still assuming that people are aware of those structures in the first place, I said. Which they're not, most of the time. Dale didn't even look surprised this time. If anything, he looked ready. I'm not assuming awareness, he replied. I'm saying the structures exist regardless. Then how can you hold people accountable for something they don't even recognize? I'm not removing accountability, he said. I'm saying it's incomplete without context. I leaned forward. That sounds like an excuse. It's not an excuse, he said calmly. It's an explanation. Those aren't as different as you think. They are if you care about accuracy. There it was again. That edge. But this time, I noticed something else too. He wasn't dismissing me. He was building off what I said. That threw me off just enough for him to keep going. You're right that people make choices, he added. I'm not arguing against that. I frowned slightly. Then what are you arguing? That the conditions around those choices matter more than you're willing to admit. I opened my mouth to respond, then stopped. Because the way he said it didn't feel like a contradiction. It felt like an extension. And I didn't like how much sense that made. The professor cut in again before I could fully respond, steering the discussion somewhere else. But the tension between us didn't go away. If anything, it shifted. It wasn't just opposition anymore. It was alignment. Slight, uncomfortable, undeniable. After class, I didn't rush out this time. I told myself I was just packing slowly. That I didn't care whether he talked to me again. Still think I'm wrong? I didn't even look up. Yeah. He stepped closer. I could see his shoes now, just at the edge of my vision. About everything? I zipped my bag, finally meeting his eyes. Mostly. He tilted his head slightly. Mostly. Don't get used to it. I won't, he said. Then, after a beat, you made a good point today. That wasn't what I expected. I blinked. What? About awareness, he said. You're right. It complicates the argument. I studied him, trying to figure out if this was some kind of tactic. You don't have to pretend, I said. I'm not pretending. You literally argued against me for an hour. And I still think you're partially wrong, he said. That doesn't mean you didn't say anything useful. I let out a short breath, somewhere between a laugh and confusion. You're annoying. I've been told that. We stood there for a second, neither of us moving. It wasn't awkward, just suspended. Why do you keep doing that? I asked. Doing what? Agreeing with me and arguing with me at the same time. He considered that. Because you're not as far off as you think you are, he said. You just stop halfway. My eyebrows pulled together. I don't stop halfway. You do, he said. Right when it gets uncomfortable. That's not, I stopped. Because again, that hesitation. And again, he noticed. You just did it, he said quietly. I exhaled, looking away for a second. You're reading too much into it. Maybe, he said. But he didn't sound convinced. Neither did I. We started walking out of the building together without really deciding to. Side by side, like it was normal. So what? I said after a moment. You think if I just followed your argument all the way through, I'd suddenly agree with you? No, he said. I glanced at him. No. I think you'd realize we're arguing about the same thing from different angles. I frowned. We're definitely not. He smiled slightly. Yeah, that's what you keep saying. There was something about the way he looked at me, then not challenging, not dismissive, just certain. And for the first time, I felt it shift completely. This wasn't just about being right anymore. It was about figuring out why we kept ending up in the same place without meaning to. And that realization stuck with me longer than I wanted it to. By the third seminar, people were starting to notice. Not just that Dale and I argued, but how we argued. It wasn't random. It wasn't loud for the sake of being loud. It had a rhythm now, predictable in the worst way. Like the moment one of us spoke, the other one was already preparing a response. I told myself I wasn't thinking about it outside of class. That was a lie. I'd caught myself twice that week, staring at my notes and rewriting arguments not for the assignment, but for him. Anticipating what he'd say, building responses in advance, which was ridiculous. Except when I walked into the seminar room that day and saw him already there, I felt it again, that same sharp awareness. Let me guess, I said, dropping into my chair. You've already decided what I'm going to say today. Dale didn't even look up from his notebook at first. Only the first half. I scoffed. You're unbelievable. He glanced up then, calm as ever. You're predictable. I am not. You are, he said simply. You start strong, then you pull back right when things get complicated. That's not, I stopped. He raised an eyebrow. Okay, that doesn't count, I muttered. That almost made him laugh. Almost. The seminar started, and like clockwork, we ended up on opposite sides again. But something was different this time. I noticed it halfway through. We weren't actually disagreeing as much as we thought. You're still framing it like responsibility is isolated, Dale said, leaning forward slightly. But it's not. It's relational. I'm not saying it's isolated, I replied. I'm saying it doesn't disappear just because there are external factors. I didn't say it disappears. You're treating it like it weakens. It does weaken in certain contexts, he said. That's the whole point. And I'm saying it doesn't have to, I pushed back. People can still act against those contexts. And when they don't, they're still responsible for what they could have done, not what they were realistically positioned to do. Yes, I said. Then, after a beat, at least partially, Dale paused. That pause was new. You just adjusted your argument, he said. I frowned. No, I didn't. You did, he said, more quietly now. You added a qualifier. I opened my mouth to deny it, then stopped, because he was right, and he knew it. That's not the same thing, I said, but it sounded weaker than I wanted. It kind of is. I leaned back, exhaling sharply. You're insufferable. You're evolving, he replied. That shouldn't have hit the way it did. But it did. The professor let the discussion run longer than usual, probably because half the class had completely checked out and was just watching us go back and forth. At one point, someone behind me whispered, "This is better than Netflix." I ignored it. Mostly. By the time class ended, my brain felt like it had been pulled in 10 different directions. And somehow, I didn't hate it. That was new too. Outside the classroom, I slowed down again without meaning to. Dale caught up easily. You changed your position, he said. I refined it. I corrected. That's what I said. No, it's not. He glanced at me, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. You're impossible. That's my line. We walked down the steps together, the late afternoon light hitting just right, making everything feel quieter than it should have been. I wasn't trying to win, I said after a moment. I know. That surprised me. You do? Yeah, he said. You stopped trying to corner the argument. I hesitated. So did you. He nodded. Yeah. Another pause. Not uncomfortable. Just different. I think we're arguing the same core idea, he said slowly. Just prioritizing different parts of it. I glanced at him. You're still wrong about the priority. He huffed a quiet laugh. Of course I am. But, I added, before I could stop myself. He looked at me. But you're not completely off, I finished. That did it. He actually smiled this time. Not subtle. Not almost. Real. Careful, he said. You're getting reasonable. Don't get used to it. I won't. We reached the edge of campus, where people usually split off in different directions. This time, neither of us stopped immediately. So what now? I asked. He shrugged. We keep arguing, I guess. Obviously. Another beat. Then he said, or we could not. I frowned slightly. Not argue, he clarified. Just talk. I stared at him for a second. That sounds suspicious, I said. It probably is. I should have said no. Should have kept things exactly where they were contained, predictable, easy to define. Instead, I heard myself say, fine. But if you say something wrong, I'm still calling it out. He nodded. I'd expect nothing less. And just like that, we kept walking. Not as opponents. Not exactly as anything else either. But definitely not the same as before. Not arguing with Dale felt unnatural. I didn't realize how much of our dynamic depended on that tension until it was gone. Or at least muted. We ended up at a small cafe just off campus. Nothing fancy. Cheap coffee, crowded tables, people typing on laptops like their lives depended on it. We sat across from each other again. Of course we did. So, I said, wrapping my hands around my cup, this is weird. A little, Dale admitted. I nodded. We're not arguing. Yet. I narrowed my eyes. Don't ruin it. That made him smile again quicker this time. Easier. It was strange how different he seemed outside the seminar room. Less sharp, I guess. Or maybe just less guarded. So what do we talk about? I asked. If we're not trying to prove each other wrong. He leaned back slightly, considering that. We could start with why you care so much. I let out a short laugh. That's your version of not arguing? I'm asking, he said calmly. That's dangerous. Probably. I hesitated. Because I had an answer. I just didn't like it. I don't like when people avoid responsibility, I said finally. It feels easy. Like a way out. Dale didn't interrupt. Didn't jump in. Just listened. That threw me off more than anything. I've seen it happen, I added. People doing things and then acting like they had no control over it. Like everything just happened to them. He nodded slowly. So for you, it's about accountability. Yeah. Control too, he asked. I frowned slightly. What do you mean? You push back hard against anything that limits agency, he said. That usually means control matters. I opened my mouth, then stopped. Again, it was starting to annoy me how often he did that. Maybe, I admitted. He didn't react like he'd won something. He just said, that makes sense. That really threw me off. You're not going to argue with that? I asked. No. Why not? Because I agree with you. I stared at him. You agree with me? Yeah. That feels wrong. He laughed quietly. You'll survive. I shook my head, looking down at my coffee for a second before glancing back up. What about you? I asked. Why do you care so much about context? He didn't answer right away. And for the first time, I saw a hesitation. Not the kind he pointed out in me. Something deeper. I don't like judging people too quickly, he said finally. Or too harshly. That sounds reasonable, I said cautiously. It's not just that, he added. I've seen what happens when people don't get any room to be understood. I studied him more closely now. You're talking about someone specific. He gave a small, almost reluctant nod. Family? I asked. Yeah. That was all he said. But it was enough. We sat there in a quieter kind of silence, now not tense, not charged like before. Just real. You know what's annoying? I said after a moment. What? I think we've been having the same argument this whole time. He looked at me, already knowing where I was going. Yeah, he said. I'm arguing that people should be held accountable. I continued. You're arguing that they should be understood. And those aren't mutually exclusive, he finished. I exhaled slowly. No, I admitted. They're not. There it was. The thing we'd been circling around for weeks. Not a contradiction. Just different starting points. I hate that you were right about that, I muttered. I wasn't right, he said. We just got there from different sides. That still counts. Not really. I leaned back, studying him. You're way less annoying when you're not trying to win. He raised an eyebrow. I was never trying to win. Yeah, okay. I wasn't, he said, more quietly now. Something about that made me pause. Because I believed him. And that changed things more than I expected. We stayed there longer than we planned. Talking, not debating, not interrupting, just talking. About classes. About random things. About how neither of us actually liked most of the people in that seminar. At one point, I said something dumb, half a joke, not even fully thought through. Dale laughed. Not polite. Not restrained. Real. And I felt it. That shift. Subtle, but undeniable. This wasn't just about arguments anymore. You're different outside class, I said without thinking. He glanced at me. How? Less intense. That's disappointing. I smirked. Don't worry. You're still kind of insufferable. Good. Another pause. Then he said, you are too, by the way. Obviously. We both smiled at that. And for a second, it felt easy. Too easy. Which is probably why I noticed it immediately when something changed. It was small. The way his eyes lingered just a little longer than necessary. The way the conversation slowed for a second, like neither of us knew what came next. I looked away first. Okay, I said, clearing my throat slightly. We should probably go before this gets weird. Dale didn't argue. Yeah, he said. Probably. But neither of us moved right away. And that was the problem. Because for the first time, the silence between us didn't feel like something to fill. It felt like something we were both suddenly aware of. After that cafe, things didn't go back to normal. Not seminar normal. At least. We still argued. Of course we did. But it changed. The next time we were in class, it wasn't about proving anything anymore. It was like we were building something together instead of tearing each other down. I think you're still overestimating how much awareness matters, I said, leaning forward slightly. Dale shook his head. And I think you're underestimating how much it limits people. Limits, yes, I said. Defines? No. He paused. Okay, he said slowly. That's actually a better way to put it. I blinked. You're not even going to fight me on that. I am, he said. Just not yet. That made me laugh under my breath. Someone across the circle groaned quietly. You guys are unbearable. We both ignored it. But I caught the way Dale glanced at me, quick, subtle, like we were sharing something no one else quite got. And that stuck with me the rest of the day. After class, we didn't even question it anymore. We just walked out together. So, I said, are we still pretending this is about philosophy? Dale glanced at me. What else would it be about? I shrugged. You tell me. He didn't answer right away. And that silence felt different from all the others. Do you always deflect like that? He asked finally. Do you always overanalyze everything? Yes. Then yeah, I said. I guess I do. He smiled slightly. That tracks. We slowed down near the same spot as last time, but neither of us suggested the cafe. Not out loud, but we both noticed. You busy? He asked. No, I said. You? He shook his head. Not really. Another pause. Then I said, we could grab something. Yeah, he replied. We could. We ended up walking further this time. Not just the same cave somewhere new. Like we were both avoiding making it feel like a routine, even though it already was. The conversation started easy again. Classes. Random complaints. A story about one of his professors that made me laugh harder than I expected. But underneath it, there was something else now. Something quieter. More careful. At one point, I caught myself just looking at him. Not because he was talking, just because. And when he noticed, I looked away too quickly. Something on my face? He asked. No. You were staring. I wasn't. You were. I exhaled. Okay, maybe a little. Why? I hesitated. Because I didn't have a clean answer. You're different, I said instead. You already said that. I mean it differently now. That got his attention. How? I shrugged, searching for the words. In class, you're precise. Controlled. Like everything you say is calculated. And now you're just, I trailed off. Just what? I met his eyes for a second. Easier to read. That wasn't entirely true, but it felt close enough. Dale held my gaze a second longer than usual. I could say the same about you, he said quietly. My chest tightened slightly. That's not a good thing, I said. I think it is. I shook my head, looking down at the table. Yeah, well, don't get used to it. I won't, he said. But again, he didn't sound convinced. The conversation slowed after that. Not awkward, just heavier. Like we were both aware we'd crossed into something neither of us had planned. So what happens now? I asked, more to myself than to him. Dale leaned back slightly. What do you mean? I gestured vaguely between us. This. He didn't rush to answer. Didn't deflect. I don't know, he said honestly. We keep talking, I guess. That sounds dangerously simple. It usually is. I let out a quiet breath. Yeah. We sat there for a moment, neither of us reaching for our phones, neither of us trying to fill the space. And then, almost without thinking, I said, I look forward to this. The second the words left my mouth, I felt it. That shift. Dale's expression changed not dramatically, but enough. You do, he asked. I nodded, slower now. Yeah. He looked down for a second, like he was processing that. Me too, he said. Simple. But it landed harder than anything we'd argued about. We left a little after that, walking side by side again, but quieter this time. Not because there was nothing to say, because there was too much. At one point, our hands brushed just slightly, barely anything. But neither of us pulled away immediately. And that was new. I felt it. That awareness again. Stronger now. We reached the same split in the path as always. This time, I didn't speak first. Neither did he. See you next seminar? I said eventually. Yeah, he replied. Another pause. Then, softer. Hector. I looked at him. Don't disappear on me, he said. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't light. And for the first time, I understood exactly what he meant. I won't, I said. And I meant it. But as I walked away, I realized something that made my chest feel tight in a completely new way. This wasn't just about arguments anymore. And whatever this was becoming, neither of us was ready to pretend we didn't see it. After that, everything felt closer. Not in an obvious way. We didn't suddenly start acting like something had changed. But it had. And we both knew it. The next seminar, I walked in and didn't even look for a seat. I looked for him. Dale was already there, flipping through his notes. But he glanced up the second I entered like he'd been expecting me. There was that look again. Recognition. Something quieter underneath it. I sat down across from him without saying anything. On time, he said. Don't sound so surprised. I'm not, he replied. Just noting a pattern. I rolled my eyes. You really can't help yourself, can you? No. That almost made me smile. The seminar started, but for the first time, I wasn't thinking about how to argue. I was thinking about him, which was a problem. Because when he spoke, I wasn't just listening to what he was saying anymore, I was watching him. The way he paused before making a point. The way he adjusted his tone depending on who he was talking to. The way he looked at me when he knew I was about to jump in. You're going to interrupt, he said at one point, mid-discussion. I wasn't. I replied immediately. He raised an eyebrow. Okay, I admitted. A few people laughed. But it felt different now. Lighter. Easier. And somehow more personal. When I did jump in, it wasn't to shut him down. It was to meet him halfway. I think you're still assuming too much consistency in how people respond to pressure, I said. And I think you're assuming too much freedom, he replied. Not freedom, I said. Variation. He paused. Okay, he said slowly. That's actually important. I smirked slightly. You're welcome. I didn't thank you. You implied it. I didn't. You did. He shook his head, but there was that look again. That almost smile. And for a second, everything else in the room faded out. I didn't notice the professor calling on someone else. Didn't notice the shift in conversation. Just that. Him. After class, we didn't even hesitate. We fell into step next to each other like it was automatic now. So, I said, you're getting softer. Dale glanced at me. I'm not. You are, I said. You're agreeing with me more. I'm refining your arguments. That's worse. He huffed a quiet laugh. You're impossible. That's still my line. We stepped outside, the air cooler than it had been all week. It felt sharper somehow, like everything was a little more defined. You've changed too, he said after a moment. I frowned. How? You don't argue just to push back anymore. That's not true. It is, he said. You listen first now. I opened my mouth, then stopped. Okay, maybe a little, I admitted. He nodded like he expected that. I think we're both doing it, he added. Doing what? Actually trying to understand each other. I exhaled slowly. That sounds dangerously healthy. It probably is. We walked in silence for a bit after that. Not awkward. Just aware. At some point, I said, you know what's weird? What? I don't think we ever really disagreed. Dale didn't answer right away. I think we did, he said finally. Just not in the way we thought. Yeah, I said. We were arguing conclusions when we actually shared the same premise. He glanced at me. That's exactly it. There it was again. That alignment. Clearer now. Stronger. And harder to ignore. We ended up back at the same cafe as the first time. Neither of us said anything about it. We just went in. Sat down. Like it was already ours. At one point, our conversation drifted off completely. Not into silence. Just into something slower. I don't even remember what we were talking about. I just remember the moment. The way he looked at me. Not analyzing. Not challenging. Just there. You're staring again, he said quietly. I didn't look away this time. Yeah, I admitted. Why? I could have deflected. Made a joke. Turned it into something easier. But I didn't. Because I think I get it now, I said. His expression shifted slightly. Get what? Why we kept arguing. He leaned forward just a little. Why? I held his gaze. Because it was easier than this. A pause. What is this? He asked. I swallowed. Because now there wasn't really a way to avoid it. This, I said, gesturing lightly between us, where we're not hiding behind arguments anymore. He didn't respond right away. Didn't look away either. Yeah, he said finally. It was easier. But worse, I added. Yeah. Another pause. This one heavier. Real. And then, almost without thinking, I said it. I like this better. Dale's eyes softened slightly. Me too, he said. Quiet. Certain. And that was it. That was the moment everything shifted from something we could pretend not to see into something we both finally admitted was there. We didn't rush it. Didn't suddenly turn it into something bigger than it was. We just stayed there, talking, looking at each other a little longer than before, letting the space exist without filling it. And when we left, walking side by side again, this time, when our hands brushed, neither of us moved away at all. After that day, there was no going back. Not to the old arguments. Not to pretending this was just some intellectual back and forth that happened to be a little intense. We still talked. We still disagreed sometimes. But the energy had shifted completely. It wasn't about opposition anymore. It was about closeness. And that was a lot harder to navigate. The next time I saw Dale, it wasn't in class. It was late afternoon, a random day we didn't even have the seminar. I was walking across campus, half distracted, when I spotted him sitting on the steps outside one of the buildings, headphones around his neck, notebook open but clearly ignored. He looked up before I even said anything. Like he felt it. Hector, he said. There was something in the way he said my name now. Not casual. Not distant. Just familiar. I stopped in front of him. You skipping work or pretending to study? Pretending, he said. Good. Wouldn't want you to break character. He closed his notebook, like I'd already interrupted whatever he was pretending to do. You busy? He asked. I shook my head. Not anymore. He nodded once, then shifted slightly, making space next to him. I sat down, closer than necessary. Neither of us commented on it. For a minute, we didn't say anything. Just sat there, people passing by, the noise of campus moving around us like it had nothing to do with whatever was happening right here. You've been quiet, he said. I glanced at him. We saw each other 2 days ago. You've been quiet since then. I frowned slightly. You've been paying attention. Yeah, he said simply. That did something to me. I've just been thinking, I admitted. About. I hesitated, then decided not to overcomplicate it. Us. He didn't react immediately, but I saw the way his shoulders shifted just slightly, like the word had weight. Okay, he said. And I don't really know what this is, I said. Honest. Simple. Uncomfortable. Dale nodded slowly. Yeah. That's it. I asked. Just yeah? I don't know either, he said. I've just been letting it happen. That sounds very unlike you. I know. I huffed a quiet laugh. You usually analyze everything to death. I still am, he said. Just not out loud. I turned toward him a little more. And what are you concluding? I asked. He met my eyes. That I don't want to stop whatever this is. That hit harder than I expected. I looked away for a second, exhaling slowly. Yeah, I said. Same. Silence. But not empty. Full. Heavy in a good way. You know what's funny? I said after a moment. What? We spent weeks arguing like we were on completely opposite sides. He nodded. Yeah. And now it feels like we've been on the same side the whole time. I think we were, he said. I glanced at him. Then why did it take us so long to figure that out? He didn't answer right away. Then, because arguing was safer. I let that sit for a second. Safer than what? He looked at me. Then this. There it was again. No avoiding it now. No pretending we didn't know what this meant. My chest felt tight, but not in a bad way. Just real. I'm not good at this part, I admitted. What part? The part where things aren't clearly defined, I said. Where it's not just right or wrong. Dale nodded slightly. Yeah, me neither. We sat there for a second, both of us somewhere between steady and uncertain. Then, without thinking too much about it, I said, I don't want this to get weird. He raised an eyebrow slightly. Too late. I laughed under my breath. You know what I mean. I do, he said. And I don't think it has to. How? He considered that. By not overcomplicating it, he said. We keep doing what we've been doing. Talking. Yeah. Spending time together? Yeah. I hesitated. And he held my gaze. And seeing where it goes. Simple. Again. Always simple with him. I nodded slowly. Okay. Another pause. Then, quieter. Okay. We didn't make it into some big moment. Didn't label anything. Didn't try to define it into something neat and safe. We just stayed there, talking about nothing again. But it felt different now. Because underneath it, there was something steady. Something mutual. something we'd both finally stopped pretending not to see. When we stood up to leave, it felt natural to walk side by side again. Like always. Except now, there was no question about why. At one point, our hands brushed again. This time, I didn't even think about it. I just let my fingers stay there for a second longer. Dale didn't pull away. He just matched it. Quiet. Intentional. And somehow, that said more than anything we'd argued about from the start. Because in the end, we weren't opposite at all. We just needed time to realize. We'd been thinking the same way the entire time. We just had to find each other in it. It didn't turn into something dramatic. No sudden moment where everything changed overnight. No big realization like in movies. It just settled. Slowly. Naturally. Like something that had already been there for a while. And we finally stopped fighting it. A few days later, we were back in the seminar. Same room. Same circle. Same professor. But it felt completely different. I walked in and caught Dale's eye immediately. He gave me a small nod, nothing obvious. Nothing anyone else would notice. But I felt it. I sat across from him again, like always. Only now, it didn't feel like facing off. It felt like meeting. The discussion started, and for the first time since the semester began, we didn't jump in right away. Other people talked. Bad takes. Half-finished thoughts. The usual. I glanced at Dale once, and he was already looking at me. Like we were both thinking the same thing. He gestured slightly, like go ahead. I shook my head, like you first. He almost smiled. Finally, I spoke. I think we're still framing this too much as a conflict, I said. Like it has to be one or the other. Dale didn't interrupt. Didn't jump in. Just listened. Which still wasn't normal. I don't think responsibility and context cancel each other out. I continued. I think they explain each other. There was a pause. Then Dale spoke. Yeah, he said. I agree with that. The room went quiet. Not because it was a groundbreaking point. Because it was us. Not arguing. Not pushing. Just aligning. Someone across the circle frowned. Wait, so you guys agree now? I glanced at Dale. He glanced at me. And for the first time, we both laughed. Yeah, I said. I guess we do. That's disappointing, someone muttered. Speak for yourself, Dale replied calmly. I caught the way his tone shifted slightly when he said it. Not defensive, just certain. The rest of the seminar moved on, but something had already clicked into place. We weren't two sides anymore. We were just part of the same conversation. After class, everything felt lighter. Easier. We walked out together, like always. So that's it, I said. No more debates. Dale shrugged. I'm sure we'll find something else to argue about. Good, I said. I'd hate for you to get boring. That won't happen. I know. We stepped outside, the air warmer now, the kind that made everything feel a little slower. You know what's weird? I said. What? I don't miss arguing with you. He glanced at me. That is weird. I thought I would, I admitted. But I don't. He nodded slightly. Yeah. Another pause. Then, quieter. I like this better. I looked at him. Yeah, I said. Me too. We stopped walking without really planning to. Right there on the edge of campus, where everything had started feeling different weeks ago. Except now, there was no tension. No confusion. Just clarity. I think we made it harder than it needed to be, I said. We definitely did, he agreed. Arguing all the time. Avoiding everything else. I exhaled, a small smile slipping through. We're kind of stupid. Only a little. I shook my head. No, pretty sure it was a lot. That got a real laugh out of him. And then, quietly, naturally, I reached for his hand. Not accidental this time. Not hesitant. Just intentional. He looked at it for a second, then back at me. And then he laced his fingers with mine. No tension. No second guessing. Just right. We really did think the same way the whole time, I said. Yeah, he replied. And we spent weeks fighting it. We did. I glanced at him, a small smile pulling at my face. That's kind of embarrassing. It is. But also, I hesitated. He waited. Worth it, I finished. His expression softened slightly. Yeah, he said. It was. We stood there for another moment, not rushing it. Not turning it into something bigger than it was. Because it already felt like enough. Eventually, we started walking again. Still side by side. Still close. But now, there was no question about it. No confusion. No pretending. Just something simple. Something real. And for once, we didn't need to argue to understand each other anymore.